Welcome everybody at home and welcome everybody here. Nice to see you. A lovely turnout again. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to be hearing from John later, who's going to be taking us off to tropical climes, which will be very nice considering the foul weather we're having at the moment here. But that's in about 5 or 10 minutes. But first of all, I would like to read out a list of new members because it's quite impressive. And they are new members since March, I believe, yeah. Ian. Yeah, okay. So I know there are one, possibly two here, but anyway, Rachel Powell of Wolverhampton, Nick Bell of Maidenhead, Matthew Ball of Winkfield Row, Andrew Harrison of Wokingham, Arabah Macmillan of Reading, Kabir Joshi of Ivor Heath, Angela Gunn of Woodley, Mark Waters of Lower Earley, Peter Wilmot of Reading, Alice Cholik, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that properly. I'm sorry, Alice, if you're watching, from Caversham, Les Hutt from Reading, Emma Eccleston from Reading, and Isabella War, who I believe are in the same property, Sue Ashwell of Spencer's Wood, Sophie Odlin of Reading, Molly Vogel of Reading, and Mrs. Will Taylor of Little Hat Sandhurst. So I don't know if the Mrs. or the Will is not quite right, but maybe it's Wilhelmina of Little Sandhurst. So that's 17 new members. I believe one or two are here this evening. And if any of you haven't got your Birds of Berkshire book, then Jane has them. Jane, sitting at the front here with Robin, has got them if anybody hasn't got one yet. Okay. I don't have any information, I'm afraid, about local meetings. Sorry about that. I haven't been given any information about local meetings, but I'm sure we can look them up on the internet, or you could. Are there any officers' announcements? Anybody want to say anything? Any of our committee members? No? Okay. Right, just one moment. The next outdoor meeting or trip, I believe, is a joint NDOC BOC field trip by car to Leap. And Bob Lyle is taking it, and people are to meet at 10 o'clock at Shore Car Park. Okay. Are there any bird sightings before we go into the talk? Yes.
Yes, the NDOC BOC meeting this Monday.
Right.
We saw white-tailed eagle at the something viewpoint. So it's one of 4 sites that Bob Lyle.
A white-tailed eagle has been seen at
Poole Harbour. No.
Poole Harbour.
Common viewpoint.
Ham Common Viewpoint. I don't know where that is. Right. Okay. So white-tailed eagle has been seen. That's pretty good. All I've had is some rotten old parakeets in my back garden, which I'm not very impressed with. Anybody else?
The excitement of the weekend was a booted eagle, which was not seen by me, but was around sort of Revenham Hill and sort of the Oxfordshire, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire border.
Apparently, a booted eagle has been seen around Revenham Hill. That's enough, Robin. And anybody else? Yes.
You probably all know that tawny owls at Maiden Early Reserve.
Oh yeah.
2 great.
Hooting away. Tawny owls hooting away at Maiden Early Reserve. Sitting outside the nest boxes. That's lovely. That's nice to see. Yes.
Well, I have photos. Yeah.
Elaine Charlson has photos of them, she says.
They were on the BBC News.
On the BBC News?
Online news.
Right. Okay. Right.
It said Maiden Early, tawny owl.
Good.
In that place.
Okay.
I happened to photograph a black-headed gull at Henley a few days ago and found a big ring on its leg.
You photographed a black-headed gull with a big ring on its leg? Yeah. Oh, a dead one?
No.
Oh, a live one.
Not rung.
Ringed in. It was ringed in Poland, everybody. Right. Okay.
Lapland bunting, Staines Reservoir.
Oh, what was that? A black-headed bunting at Staines Reservoir.
No, Lapland bunting.
Yep, that's great. Thank you very much. A Lapland bunting. Anybody else at home? Nope. Right. Okay. Right, we're going to hear now from John Clark. As I said earlier, he has co-edited Birds of Hampshire, which was published in 1993, and written Rare Birds of Hampshire, which was published in 2022. He was county recorder from 1993 to 2010, and then he took early retirement in 2008, lucky man, and began to travel extensively around the world. He's now seen just under 9,000 species. Is it still just under 9,000? It's just over 9,000 now. Right. He's going to be starting his talk in Tahiti, and it was a 5-week expedition. So now we are going to see, I believe, a lot of exotic photographs of exotic birds and who else? Who knows what else? Okay, thank you. Can I welcome John Clark, please, to the meeting? We'll need to stand in front of so they can see you there.
Right, okay. Good evening, everybody. Nice to be here. I think I did a talk to the Reading Ornithological Club about the birds of the Hants-Surrey border about 30 years ago. So it's the first time I've been back since. But so I've got to use these things to. How do I move the slides on? Ah, no,
Right arrow.
I've messed it up
Oh.
already.
You don't know how difficult this is. Right, that, yeah, or that.
Right, the right arrow.
Yeah.
Right, okay. That's my little note. Yeah. Okay. So I thought I'd tell you something about getting there, because obviously it's a long way away to go to Tahiti. So there's my itinerary. So I went from London to Doha, leaving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and getting to Doha just after midnight. And then I went on a flight from Doha to Auckland, and it's the longest flight I've ever been on. I think it was 17 hours. And I've actually been on it again since on a different trip. So I think I went through two nights, because when you get to, oh no, Auckland, you've gone forward a day. And then I had to go from Auckland to Tahiti. That's right, you go back a day. You see, I arrived in Tahiti on the 1st of September, having left New Zealand on the 2nd of September. So the idea was to stay in Tahiti for a day or two, just to allow for any disasters, not getting there and all the rest of it. But I did get there okay. So I stayed in this nice little hotel and relaxed for a couple of days. Right, so here's a map of the area. So it's always difficult to spot Tahiti. It's somewhere in here.
Left a bit.
Left a bit. There
Right
it is.
a bit.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
That's it, Tahiti. So we gathered in Tahiti. This was interesting. This was a trip organised by Bird Tour Asia, which is a company some of you may have been on tours with. And there were 12 people and two leaders from Bird Tour Asia. So the first thing we had to do was we had to take a flight from Tahiti to Mangareva, which is right down there. So that was a flight of about 1,000 miles further on to meet the boat, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And from there, we went eastwards to Pitcairn and some of the associated islands with Pitcairn. Pitcairn, of course, is a British protectorate. Most of the other islands are French. We came back from Pitcairn, ended up back at Mangareva, and flew back to Tahiti. Had 2 or 3 days in Tahiti while the boat steamed up to the Marquesas, which are up here. And then we flew from Tahiti to the Marquesas and met the boat again and went round some of the islands there. And then after all of that, I went to the Cook Islands, which are down here. So it was a 5-week trip. So there's a map of Pitcairn. You'll all have heard of Pitcairn Island because of the connection with the mutiny on the Bounty and so on. But it was quite astonishing to be able to visit there. So there's the plane that we took from Tahiti down to Mangareva. We stopped at a little island on the way. This is a typical sort of scene. I'm going to go through the slides quite quickly. When we got to Mangareva, you had to take this interesting looking bit of transport which went across the bay to the harbour where the boat was. And here is the boat that we went on. It's called the Braveheart, and it's a converted sort of cargo ship. So it had room for say 12 passengers, 2 leaders. I think there was a crew of about 6. And that was our home for quite a long time. And we were told that, you know, it's usually quite a smooth trip. But of course, you can guess our trip turned out to be the roughest one they'd ever had, I think. But a sort of little tip for some of you, if you ever go on cruises, I started wearing these wrist bracelet things. They work brilliantly. I didn't get sick at all. It was quite tremendous. So we got to Mangareva, and we set off in the evening, and we saw I think that's a Christmas Island shearwater. We started to see some seabirds. Of course, the idea of this trip was to focus on the endemic birds of the various islands, but also we got the chance to see a lot of seabirds as well. Another view. And then the ship, it was 2.5 days to get to Pitcairn. So we anchored overnight, and then the next morning we started to see more seabirds. This is a white-faced storm petrel. And this is a Polynesian storm petrel, which is one of the birds that a lot of people wanted to see. So we're now offshore at Tahiti, and this was the boat the sort of transport we had to get from our boat to the land. There we are. Welcome to Pitcairn. A little map of Pitcairn. There's about 48 people live on Pitcairn, and they're nearly all descended from mutineers from the Bounty ship. And there's walks there, various signs, and there's one endemic bird on Pitcairn, and this is a Pitcairn reed warbler. Now we'll come back to reed warblers quite a bit during this trip, so I do apologise if you get a bit bored with reed warblers. But they're all a bit different, and in fact, you know, they're very variable. But they're also very tame, most of these birds. Here's some views from Pitcairn. We stayed there for an afternoon, and then we left that evening. Now, this is an interesting slide because I showed it to various people. There is a picture of me posting a postcard. They still haven't come. And that was 5 years ago now. It was a great pity, really. They had these special stamps on. They actually had a picture of George VI rather than Queen Elizabeth on the stamp, some special stamp, but maybe that was why they didn't come. I don't know, but there we go. So we set off, and we actually saw this is a Buller's albatross, which was quite soon after we set off from Pitcairn, but we didn't see many. We saw virtually no albatrosses on the trip because the areas where we were going are actually quite a long way north from the southern sort of Antarctic areas. You've got to go much further south to see more albatrosses. So we were heading for Henderson Island next, which is an uninhabited island, British protectorate, and it took us. We got there. I think we got there the next day, late in the day, but we didn't land until the next morning. So there are our first views of Henderson Island. It's a raised coral atoll. It's got 4 endemic birds, and it's got quite a lot of seabirds as well. But it's also got Polynesian rats, and an attempt was made to get rid of the rats in 2012, but unfortunately it failed. And when I was there in 2019, they were quite abundant again, apparently. But they're not the black rats; they're the Polynesian rats, which aren't quite as destructive as the black rats. But nonetheless, I don't know whether they've tried again they were scheduled to try again to rid it of rats, but I don't know the latest news. But you can only access the shore and the wooded areas beneath the cliffs. You can't get up on top, or we couldn't anyway. But I gather that there's lots of fissures and cracks, and it's thought that some of the rats got down in those and didn't take the bait and, you know, escaped, basically. Another view. There's me. Just a Pitcairn, Henderson Islands, part of the Pitcairn Islands group, which is a UK overseas territory. There's a book that's come out recently that it summarises a lot of the papers that have been in British Birds magazine about all the UK overseas territories. And of course, we think about the birds we've got in the UK, but we're also responsible for a lot of birds that are on these places as well. So here's the first one that we saw, Stevens or Henderson lorikeet. This is one of 4 lorikeets that we saw on the trip. They're all fantastic, colourful birds. Very, very attractive indeed. Feeding on the blossom within those plants there. Mars booby, quite a common, saw them quite a bit. Chick, a well-grown chick. Here's the Henderson crake, flightless. It's thought that there were many different kinds of crakes across a lot of those Pacific islands, but most of them have gone extinct, but this is one that survived. White tern and the Henderson fruit dove. Again, fruit doves are a theme that we'll see quite often, and that looks like the Henderson reed warbler in there. And then the seabirds, just remind myself what those are. Murphy's. I've got an expert with me, have I then? Do you want to do the talk? Yeah, I actually got down that they're Murphy's petrels. They're one of the commonest breeding petrels there, but they raise virtually no young because of the rat predation. I think that's one nesting there as well. Grey ternlets flying, Mars boobies, red-billed tropic birds. Pardon? Tail. Yes, very long tail. And this is the frigate bird, great frigate bird. Anybody like to hazard a guess what they are?
Bristle-thighed curlew?
Yeah, absolutely right. Bristle-thighed curlews. Yeah, I don't know if any of you've been to Alaska to try and see bristle-thighed curlews, which is where they breed, of course. And it's hard work. There's, you go to Nome and you go up a long road, and you might see a pair if you're lucky. I saw hundreds of them on this trip. Quite and very approachable as well. Yeah, they're about the size of a curlew. Yeah, perhaps a little smaller. Got to look at my notes again.
Henderson petrel, I would say.
I can't read my own writing. I'll come back to that one. Anyway, various petrels. And then we left and we saw some humpback whales. That one, I reckon, is a phoenix petrel. Anyway, we were heading for the island of Oeno, which is another part of the group. Here it is. So on all of these islands, we would drop anchor, I might say half a mile offshore, and use zodiacs to get into the shore. And it was, yeah, quite tricky. They had to, you know, check out the conditions, and very often the crew took the zodiacs in without the passengers to check out and see if it was safe. Beautiful island. This one has been cleared of rats. There's no rats here. There's another white tern and a chick. That's a wandering tattler. And there it is again. So that's a migrant from Siberia. Another petrel. That's a sheer water breeding. I think that's Murphy's petrel, probably. Got a chick there somewhere. Loads of these. These are Murphy's petrel's chick. They were all over the island. You had to be very careful where you were treading. Complete contrast to Henderson, where you didn't see any chicks at all. That's a spotless crake. That one can fly. So it's probably got there by flying. Brown noddy. See, there's your tropic bird again. One on a nest and a well-grown youngster. Red-footed boobies. So they nest in trees, whereas the Mars boobies nest on the ground. There's a youngster. There's a different colour phase of red-footed booby. Sooty tern. Frigate bird. You walk around, you know, you walk around the colonies and they just take absolutely no notice of you at all. There's a chick. So that was Oeno, and that was a complete contrast to Henderson. Although Henderson had those 4 endemic birds, on Oeno, because there's no rats there, you know, things were much healthier. So from Oeno, we were due to go to Teneraro, which is one of the Tuamoto Islands, and we were heading for there, merrily going along on our way. And in the evening, we seemed to suss that we were not going in the right direction. And it was eventually announced that we were going back to Pitcairn. And the reason why we were going back to Pitcairn was that the ship had received a request to evacuate somebody from Pitcairn Island who was seriously ill and needed to be taken to Tahiti for treatment. That's the nearest sort of big hospital. So we had to go back to Pitcairn. Most people never get to go to Pitcairn. I've been there twice. But yeah, we didn't land. We just stayed on the boat, and they transported the woman in, and she had some serious form of cancer apparently. So we had to go back to Mangareva, which took a couple of days, so that she could be dropped off and flown back to Tahiti. Although it was frustrating, it turned out that the weather was so anti-landing at the island, Teneraro, that really we didn't actually lose anything, because we wouldn't have been able to land when we got there anyway. But eventually we did get there. And this is Teneraro. This is another rat-free island. And I think this island contained the bird that I most wanted to see, and I think that a lot of people most wanted to see, which is not that one. That's an atoll fruit dove. But they're rather handsome or pretty, but it's that one. And this is the Tuamoto sandpiper, and they come and welcome you. They're really friendly. And also on that island, there's the Polynesian ground dove, which is very, very critically endangered. They're only on a few islands because, again, it's the problem with rats invading islands. That's the male, another close-up picture of the male, and the female. So we saw several of those. They're doing okay on there. The sandpipers, I think we thought there was probably at least 1,000 on the island. They were that numerous. And of course, some bristle-thighed curlews. And there was a little colony of great crested terns. You can see that Tuamoto sandpiper's got colour rings on, and they've been doing studies on them to see what they get up to. Now, this is a bit of video. Now, how do I get that to start? Do I use the mouse? Usually you have to press it to... I think I've got another bit of video as well. Whoops. So these are about the size of a common sandpiper, I'd say. Yeah, absolutely amazing birds, and I believe they survive on about 8 different islands, which are rat free, and there are also, you know, fossil remains of a number of other closely related species that are all extinct. So from there we had to go back to Mangareva again. So we went back to Mangareva, and we then flew back to Tahiti. And the idea of that was we flew back to Tahiti while the ship steamed north to the Marquesas Islands. I don't quite understand why we couldn't go on the ship to the Marquesas Islands direct, but it's something to do with immigration, because we'd been to a British place, and, well, I don't know, but it's something like that. Anyway, we had 2 or 3 days back in Tahiti. This is a society kingfisher, and that is a Tahiti reed warbler. Yeah, quite a big, yeah, really big reed. Look at the size of its beak. It's a big bird. So also in Tahiti, there are Tahiti monarchs, and the monarch is a family of flycatchers, and there's several different species in these islands, and they're all critically endangered. And the Tahiti monarch apparently was down to 2 pairs at one stage. But when we went there, there were 15 pairs. I'm afraid I don't have any photographs of them. But I was worried that during COVID and because there's a lot of French people and other workers that went out to these islands to help with the conservation of some of these birds. And I would imagine that during COVID, they all went back to France. But I did a little bit of research today, and it sounds as though they're still doing okay. Their numbers are at least stable. Also on Tahiti, there's a swallow and there's a fruit dove. So from there, we took another flight and we went up to the Marquesas Islands. So we visited 6 islands, and I'm going to just show them to you now. So the first island we went to is this one here, Nukuhiva, and this is a quite large and a populated island. And from there, we went to Atatua, which is uninhabited. Then we went to Uahuka, which is inhabited. And then we went to this one, Tahuata, which is also inhabited. And then we went to Mohatani here, which is uninhabited. And then we went to Fatuhiva, last of all, which is inhabited. And I'm going to show you some birds from each of those. Actually, I was going to take the break at Tahiti. do you want to take the break now?
We've been speaking for 25 minutes. Go a little bit longer if you like.
Well, it's up to you. You when do you want to have your break? You tell me. I mean that.
Well, you stop now if you'd like to. Then.
Right, I'll talk about the first island, and then we'll stop. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Good. Okay. So the first island, as I say, is an inhabited island, and I think there were 5 endemics, and this is a massive great pigeon. It's called the Marquesan imperial pigeon. It's got this great big knob on its bill, and it really is a big bird. I mean, it's not the size of a crown pigeon in New Guinea, but it's a lot bigger than a wood pigeon. Another view of one, and of course there's a fruit dove. This is called the white-capped fruit dove. And the North Marquesan reed warbler. Another view. And there's also a Marquesan swiftlet. And this, we went up to a cave and had a look at a colony. And there's some of them flying about. And we actually had a night on land on that first island while we were waiting for the ship to arrive. And so the next morning we actually went to the swift colony the next morning. There's a swift hanging on to its nests. And when we were preparing to get on the boat later that afternoon, it was pouring with rain, and we found this semi-palmated plover, which of course is the American version of ringed plover. And this was apparently the 3rd record for the Marquesas Islands, so it's quite a good record. Okay, so we'll stop at that point. That's when we boarded the ship, and we'll carry on after we've had the break. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Some lovely birds there and exotic looking places.
Yes.
We'll probably be back if you can come back to us in about 10 minutes time, those at home. All right. We're going to have a little break now. See you later. We've had our refreshments, so we'll go into the second half with John telling us about the rest of his experiences, his adventure.
Okay, thank you very much. I think at this point, several people have asked me a little bit about the ship, the Braveheart. As I said, it was a converted cargo ship, really, and it was quite comfortable. Yeah, the rooms were a little cramped, 2 to a room, bunk bed. But the trip was organised, as I said, by Bird Tour Asia. There's also been similar trips organised by BirdQuest in previous years. But no trips have been there since I went in 2019. And I gather that although both BirdQuest and Bird Tour Asia are advertising it for sort of sometime in the future, as far as I know, the ship is now out of commission because it's probably not economic to repair it, I would guess. So unless they find a suitable ship to do the trip, it's not going to happen in the immediate future. So it's a bit of a lucky trip for me to be able to go on. It also did cost a lot of money. I didn't get a lot of change out of 20,000, if I'm honest, pounds. That's one advantage of not having children through your life a bit. I suppose you save a bit of money. Anyway, let's move on. So we're on that first island, Nukuhivu. The ship has arrived, and we're going to board the ship. But that's not it. That's a posh.
That would be nice.
That would be nice. Yeah, I thought that was in the harbour as well. Yeah. Anyway, in the harbour, we got the opportunity to see some rays. I think some people did a bit of snorkeling and were swimming around those things. Very incredible. anyway, we were able to leave the first evening, and we are heading for this island called Hatutua, which is uninhabited. And there was quite a lot of seabird activity. I think that's a bulwar's petrel. And there's some spinner dolphins there. Or maybe that's the bulwar's petrel. I'm sorry, I'm a bit weak on what these are called. This was the first opportunity we got to see a grey-backed tern, which is a relative of sooty and bridle tern, which is confined to the Pacific, and it was a bird we hoped to see. Fortunately, we did get some better views later in the trip, as you will see. So anyway, the next morning we were arriving at this island called Hatutua, and as you can see, it's quite an imposing island, and we had to get up that cliff face there, and we were looking for the Marquesian ground dove. We were greeted by lots of black noddies sitting in a tree. These noddies, they nest in trees. I think he looked a bit browned off. After we'd sort of got on land, this was the sort of vegetation we had to get through, and we had to fight our way up to a bit of woodland where we thought the doves might be. This island had been very dry for many, many months, possibly even years, and the doves become very rare when the rainfall drops right off. And it took us quite a long time before we eventually found one, and that was the only one we saw. So this is Marquesian ground dove. We were all sat around photographing it. Again, very approachable, but it was the only one we saw, and it's endemic to that island, if I remember rightly, or it might be on one or two of the other islands that we didn't visit. But of course, there's a reed warbler there. You're not surprised to hear. North Marquesian reed warbler. They're all different subspecies. So recently, they've split the Marquesian reed warbler into the North Marquesian and the South Marquesian, but they're all different subspecies. So maybe at some point they'll all get split even more. So I've seen quite a few of them. So I'll get a few armchair ticks, as we say. There's a white tern again, with a little fish. So a blank slide means we're going on to a new island. So from there, we stayed there for a few hours. We then went to Uahuka, and that's an inhabited island. Very nice welcome we got there too. They're obviously very pleased to see any people that visit these islands, because they don't see many people. So this island had one of the most impressive birds of the lot. Here's the local church. And it's this one. This is the ultramarine lorikeet. I actually have to here say that I had a bit of a camera malfunction while I was on this island. So these are James Eaton's pictures. But this is a fantastic bird. And the interesting thing about this one is it was on another island in the group, and they took them off that island and introduced them onto this island, because this island, I believe, is rat-free. The other island, they're now extinct on. So if it hadn't been for the fact they translocated them across to this island, they would be extinct. But there's quite a healthy population. You know, there's some hundreds of them there, I would say. This is the white-capped fruit dove, again, which I showed you on an earlier island. It will be a different race. And these are Iphis monarchs. Now, I was talking to one of you earlier about the monarchs. The monarchs are a family of flycatchers, and they tend to be confined to small islands, a lot of them. and they have a very unusual breeding strategy because they're long lived. They can live for 15 to 20 years, which is obviously very long for a passerine bird, but they only lay 1 or 2 eggs. So they concentrate on raising just a small number of young, and they are, as I say, they're long lived. So that's a female with a chick or juvenile there. We saw quite a few of these, not particularly handsome, but there we are.
Sorry, John, when you say they only raise 1 or 2, is that 1 or 2 a year or 1 or 2 in their lifetime?
No, I think they probably breed annually, but they only lay 1 or 2 eggs. Yeah. So from here, we went to Tuamoto, and we were looking for this critter. This is the Marquesan kingfisher. Is this the first kingfisher I've shown? Oh no, there was a kingfisher on Tahiti, wasn't there? So it's very much the theme of the endemic birds. They're fruit doves, kingfishers, reed warblers. There's not much monarchs. There's not much variety, and there's just these different groups have evolved to have several forms. So it took a bit of time to find this one, but we found it in the end, and then we saw several more. But as you can see, it's quite a handsome looking beast. And of course, there's another reed warbler on that island. I mean, if you get the impression it looks bigger than our reed warbler, it certainly is. Yeah, it's more like a sort of great reed warbler size, a hulking great bird. And then we got the opportunity to consume a few mangoes by the looks of things. So this is another uninhabited island. This is Mohatani, and here we were looking for the Marquesan monarch. So we had to land and climb up that hillside and get up into the forest, which was where the monarch was. So you can see it doesn't look too difficult, but there's the monarchs, male and a female. I think the male is the black and white one. And our last island was Fatuhivu. And this is where there is the connection with my Rare Birds in Hampshire book, which I'm going to give a little plug to. I bought a couple of copies along, which came out a couple of years ago, because there's a picture I'm about to show you, which is in that book. You might think, how is that? See. Beautiful island. There's the picture that's in the book. Yeah. Picture of me, yeah. And this is quite a, a carefully manicured island. And here is the nest of the Fatuhivu monarch. And this is another one where there were French workers there doing great work to protect them, and they had put up fences. There's feral cats, there's feral rats. They've all got to be kept out. There'd been a plan to try and eradicate the cats, but the locals, the people who lived there, didn't want their cats exterminated. So they have to keep trying to keep them out of the grounds. But this, I think I wrote it down, was something like 15 known pairs when I visited. So these are all critically endangered birds. So from there, that was the end of our Marquesas trip. We then had a 2.5-day trip back towards the Society Islands, back towards Tahiti. So I took over for a while. And we went first of all to Mangareva Atoll. And this was an amazingly sort of typical what you think of as the South Pacific. In fact, there's an old film called The Blue Lagoon, and that was actually filmed here. This is the Blue Lagoon. You'll see some pictures. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? Lots of noddies. Yeah, it's a bit of a tree. Yeah. So here we had the blue lorikeet, which is the, how many lorikeets have I shown you now? 3. That's the third one. We've got 1 to go. This is the blue lorikeet. And I've got a bit of a video for you here. You don't need me to tell you what this. Indeed, the Tuamoto reed water, yeah. I probably should have taken more videos with my camera actually, because they are, a lot of the birds were very approachable. And here's the greyback tern that I showed you earlier. We remember that terrible picture from when we left the Marquesas. There was a breeding colony of them here, I think. Got some quite good views. That's a juvenile. Whoops. So we had some more islands to visit before we went back to finish the tour, in the main part of the tour in Tahiti. This is Niau, Niau, and this has a kingfisher and a reed warbler, of course. Here's the kingfisher, it's a nice little one. And I've got some video of this as well. So this should play. So it's an adult with a youngster. It's got a lizard for it. So that's the youngster on the right. Of course, that last island was a low coral atoll. This island, Makatea, great big cliffs, and this clearly had a bit of a past. A lot of mining went on here. You can see the remnants of it. An old train there for transporting the metal, I guess, or the ore. There's still a few people living on these islands. There's the reed warbler, of course, yeah. That was a view from sort of elevated part we went to. And we saw the fruit dove there, which is called the Makatea fruit dove, and Polynesian imperial pigeon. And so from there, we went to Moorea, Noorea, which is one of the islands that's quite close to Tahiti. So some of the people that go diving and so on, they go to Moorea. So this is really a touristy island. This was where we finished the tour, where we left the boat. We found a Pacific golden plover with a crab in the background. Society kingfisher or Moorea kingfisher, not a very good picture, but not a very bright bird compared with some of them. There's 2 there though. And we had a sort of end of tour celebration where everybody had a bit too much to drink, I think. But one of the things I haven't told you about was that on this trip we actually had fantastic food a lot of the time, and that was because we were able, the crew were able to catch fresh fish all the time. So we had fantastic tuna and sea, crabs and lobsters and stuff like that as well. So there's some lobsters. So that was the end of the main part of the trip. And then there was an extension to the Cook Islands, which are between Tahiti and New Zealand. They're a former British colony. And we went there. That's the view from our hotel. So it was all land-based. So this is the main island, and that's, well, the city you go to is called Rarotonga, and the main island there, and there is a big reserve called Takitumu, and this reserve was created to preserve the Rarotonga monarch, and there was only 29 in 1989, but they've done again great work, and the species has recovered considerably. So we're up in the forest. This is a view down to the sea. That's a Rarotonga starling and a Rarotonga fruit dove. And this is a Rarotonga monarch. And that's a young one. And that's a Pacific imperial pigeon. So again, all of these islands, they've got a very limited number of birds, but most of them seem to be doing okay. So our next port of call was an island called Attu. So we took a little plane. I think this was a scheduled flight, but or was it? No, it may have been a charter. I can't remember. So there's the welcome we got. There's a funny sign coming up. Here you are. Would passengers please hand their AK-47 bazookas, grenades, explosive and nukes to the pilot on boarding the aircraft. Voluntary security check. So here's the fourth and final lorikeet. This one is called Kuhl's lorikeet, Kuhl. The only Kuhl I've heard of is a football player who played I think played for Reading and Aldershot actually. But this must have been a different Kuhl, I think. But yeah, this is a pretty impressive bird as well. I mean, the colours pretty stunning. And as you can see, they're very approachable. And we've got another fruit dove, same one that was on the first island there. And this is the chattering kingfisher. That is the same bird. It looks a bit different. Then we had one last island to go to. That was called Mangareva, had part of the Cook Islands. And as you can see, it's got its own kingfisher. This gave us a bit of a hard time, actually. We got there about mid-morning, and by the end of the day, we hadn't found one, I don't think. We'd seen Pacific golden plover, and we'd seen the reed warbler. But I think it took till the next morning till we got good views of the kingfisher. Anyway, that kingfisher is my closing slide. So from here, we went back to Rarotonga, flew to Auckland, and I retraced my steps back to the UK. So, yeah, it was the trip of a lifetime. Just going to those places and seeing all those different islands. There wasn't a vast number of birds, but as you can see, some of them are quite spectacular. And you know, the lorikeets were impressive, and the different pigeons and doves, and of course the Tuamoto sandpiper was one that I'd always wanted to see. Yeah, it was a very good experience. Nice to talk to you about it. So I'd be very happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Hey, John, beautiful islands and beautiful birds.
They are, aren't they? Some of them, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know about reed warblers being beautiful, but
There's one heck of a bill on it, though, wasn't it?
yeah, certainly was. Yeah.
But were there any birds of prey?
No,
None at all.
none at
They're
all.
just not there.
No, don't think so. No,
No. Robin's agreeing. There are no birds. of
no,
prey.
no birds of prey. I mean, there are probably several other groups that there weren't any of either. But no birds of prey at all.
And did you see any girls in grass skirts greeting you on Tahiti?
No, afraid not.
Oh, dear, never mind. Never mind. Would anybody like to ask Don any questions about his trip? Anybody? Jane?
How difficult was it to see most of those birds? It seemed like some of them were quite easy. Are they just there if you go to the right place?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you should say that. Yeah. Funnily enough, I've just been on a couple of trips. I went to Bolivia a few weeks ago, and I've also just been to the Lesser Antilles, you know, the West Indies. And God, it's so hard to see some of the birds. You get very frustrated. No, they're all, you know, there was one kingfisher that was a bit hard, but no, they're all easy to see.
So if you know where to go, you're likely to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. But most of the birds, if they were only on one island, you just had to find the right habitat and they'd be there. I mean, I think those things like the kingfishers and the doves, they're quite numerous. It's the things like the monarchs that are very susceptible to the rat predation that the problems are. So, you know, hopefully they may eradicate rats from more islands, but cats are a problem as well. And obviously where there are people living on the islands, they don't want their cats wiped out. So it is a problem for sure. But it's not just in that part of the world. But there's no doubt there's no doubt that a lot of birds were extinct before we even knew about them, because the fossil record shows quite a lot of other birds, things like rails, particularly, I think, and sandpipers and so on. So it's important that we preserve what we've got left, I would say.
So that's before the rats, they were extinct.
Well, no, the rats have been there for 1,000 years, I think.
Polynesians brought
the Polynesians brought the rats, yeah.
They also hunted out things. I mean, Henderson Islands, very interesting study point. It had a giant imperial pigeon as well.
Right.
They found subfossils and things.
Yeah.
And it's considered, one of the least spoiled islands because it's apart from the Polynesian rat.
Yeah.
I don't suppose everybody can hear that at home, what somebody's saying, but they are saying that the rats have been there for probably 1,000 years, and Robin is saying they were brought from Polynesia.
Yeah. I mean, I think, of all the islands, I mean, some of them were just sort of quite tough, and you had to sort of scramble up the hillsides, and they weren't particularly beautiful. But some of I mean, Henderson and Oeno were fantastic islands. I mean, it's great that there's no rats on Oeno. I mean, the number of birds on there was astonishing, and also the island Teneraro, where the sandpipers were. Yeah.
Yes.
Were there any other mammals or butterflies that you came across?
Right. So we're being asked, were there any other mammals or butterflies apart from what we've seen this evening?
I don't think there's no mammals apart from ones that have been introduced. We saw humpback whales. Apart from that, it was very disappointing for cetaceans. I don't think we saw any apart from humpback whales. Oh, and those dolphins, spinner dolphins. Insects, there really wasn't a lot, if there were any at all. I mean, I'm interested in butterflies, and I think I would have noticed. I can't remember, to be honest with you. But I mean, on the, Tahiti's quite a big island. I can't answer your question, but if there are any, it's very limited, I would say.
If there's monarchs and warblers, that could be insects of some kind, because that's what we feel.
Oh yeah, but the gentleman asked specifically about butterflies, and yeah, obviously there's insects. Yeah, for sure, there's insects. There must be some butterflies, but I don't recall them. I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. But there certainly wasn't a noticeable variety, like some places you go to.
Anybody else? No? Okay, right. Well, then we can end the meeting probably. We can thank John again for coming to speak to us this evening and tell us all about this lovely part. I don't know how many of us are going to be booking a ticket now to Tahiti. That would be very nice.
Well, I don't know. Tahiti in itself is you can obviously go to Tahiti, but you're not really going to see much of it just going to Tahiti.
No, okay.
You've got to be able to access those other islands.
That Fatu Hiva, is that the Tor Heyerdahl? The one that where the explorer went to?
Could
Fatu
well,
Hiva?
yeah. Could well be.
Yeah,
Yes,
I thought it rang a bell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he came across from the American side, didn't he?
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, right. Could we just thank John once again very much for coming to talk to us this evening?
Okay, my pleasure.
Now, the next meeting is the AGM. So if we can, we'd love to see all of you here next time and more. And people at home, please, if we could see you at the next meeting. After the AGM, assuming all goes well, Paul Alistair Collins is returning. He spoke to us before on the Svalbard and Lake Kaikini. And he's going to come back and talk about Panama. So please, everybody, we'd love to see you in 2 weeks' time back here again. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, I'm